Okay, so let's go over the Chapter 18 homework. So the first problem is a high-low problem, and you can find this explained in Chapter 18 on page 709. Problem 2, you're doing contribution margin per unit, contribution margin ratio, break-even units, and sales. All these formulas are on page 710 to 711. I would recommend making a formula sheet that you have handy as you're working through these problems. Then you can also have it when you work on the quiz and then when you get to the exam. Ideally, you would just kind of get a feel for all these formulas. My face-to-face students don't get to have a formula sheet. They just get to know them. So you certainly should get to know all these formulas. But in the beginning, maybe just have a formula sheet in front of you. Problem 3, you're going to do a contribution margin statement at the break-even level. So the first thing you need to do is figure out how many units you got to sell to break even. And then you can use that number of units, that's the sales level you're going to be using, multiply it by the selling price per unit to get sales, multiply it by the variable cost per unit to get the variable costs. Okay. And then requirement 2 is going to say, okay, what's going to happen at the break-even point if it increases? So you've got the original amount. What if it increases? That's what you're going to use for requirement 2. That was the problem 2. That was problem 3. Sorry. Problem 4 is going to be getting a target, sales at a target income. So what do you need to sell to reach this target level? Okay, so you can see the formula on page 714 in chapter 18. Requirement 2, you're going to back into the variable costs. You will have computed the sales in requirement 1. The information gives you the fixed costs and the income, so we can back those all out, subtract those from sales, and that'll get you to the variable costs. So just another way of looking at that contribution margin statement format. You need to be very familiar with that. We will be working with that a lot. All right. Question 5, margin of safety. You're not getting a lot of help from Connect. Okay. So you need to look on page 714 to see the formula. They give you the formula for the margin of safety percentage. So the margin of safety percentage, you take the margin of safety that you get in letter A and you divide it by the expected sales. Okay. So the margin of safety itself is the difference between the expected sales and the break-even sales. Okay. So they've given you the fixed costs. They've given you the sales per unit, variable cost per unit. You can calculate the break-even, and you're going to subtract that from the expected sales. Well, they tell you how many units, multiply that by the selling price, that's the expected sales. The difference is your margin of safety. You're going to take that margin of safety then and divide that by the sales to show the percent that your sales can drop before you get to the break-even point, because beyond that, then you'll be operating at a loss. Okay. So check that out. Do those formulas I would work it out on paper before you put it in the box. Do your check my work. Margin of safety, there's videos on our overview page if you need more help. All right, 6 is using calculating break-even when there's a sales mix, so when you have more than one product. So you can check out page 716 to 717 for the explanation of this. All right, so our last problem then is more practice with the contribution margin income statement. So you've been given all the information up here, information to multiply to get the sales, variable costs, fixed costs. You're just going to really be organizing the contribution margin income statement. Then you're going to use it to get your break-even point. Well, no, actually just your contribution margin ratio. Okay, so we need to get our sales per unit. So you're given the selling price per unit. Your variable cost per unit, we're just going to take the amounts that you listed here and divide it by the number of units you're told in the information. So that gets you to your contribution margin. And then your contribution margin ratio is just dividing contribution margin divided by sales, right? And I think I just mentioned this in the last video, or the last problem, that the contribution margin ratio shows you what percentage of sales is going to be available to cover your fixed costs and generated income. So that's basically what they're asking you here, is to think about that definition. So that's really just the contribution margin ratio as a decimal. Okay. And then we do have an Excel Sims problem this week. And so you're given the information for quarter 1 of year 3. Okay, but we do have a mixed cost in here, shipping expense. And so you can see the shipping expense costs and the volume over the past 2 years, and you're going to use this information to do the high-low method. Now remember, only formulas, so that's how you'll get to the go ahead and pull the numbers down here, but no typing. And then you'll calculate the variable cost per unit, and then we can back into the fixed cost per unit. And you'll use those amounts because then you're going to do the contribution margin income statement. All right, so our sales, you're given information, the units, sales price, your cost of goods sold. We've been given the cost per unit, multiplied by the units, we'll get our cost of goods sold. And then our variable expenses. So you're told a percentage for the sales commission that you're going to multiply by the sales. Right, you're going to use your sales commission percentage multiplied by sales. Your shipping expense, you will have calculated the variable cost per unit up here, and then you'll just multiply that by the number of units for quarter 1 of year 3. Okay. And then same down here, all of the fixed expenses are given to you except for shipping, but that's what you calculated up here in using the high-low method. So you have the fixed shipping cost there. All right, good luck with the work, and email me if you have questions.